It's become almost predictable at this point that the MAGA loyalists and Trump's ever-willing defenders just line up on Sunday talk shows to humiliate themselves, guys. I mean, they're always trying to justify the reckless stunt Donald Trump has just pulled. Normally, they at least get a bit of time to rehearse their excuses, but not the other morning. I mean, Scott Bessent was caught completely off guard when right in the middle of his interview, Trump unleashed, another unhinged post online. He was forced to react in real time. Bessent ended up doing the unthinkable for Trump, for a Trump ally. I mean, he flat out called Trump a liar. If I could quickly ask you to like this video, please hit that subscribe button because it really does help and support us to keep going and in our work. Now, moving on, Trump had been ranting about his disastrous tariff prices, guys. The same ones economists have repeatedly shown to hurt American consumers and farmers. And Bessent simply couldn't pretend it made any sense. What followed was a live on-air meltdown as he tried to spin Trump's nonsense and failed spectacularly. We'll break it down exactly how that played out and how Trump's latest tantrum is tied to the growing legal pressures he's facing, including the developments at the Supreme Court that Lawrence O'Donnell recently explained in detail.
In the United States Supreme Court this morning, Donald Trump was humiliated again when the Supreme Court, including the justices who Donald Trump appointed, ripped apart the biggest and stupidest policy lie of the Trump second term. At 11:22 a.m., when Neil Katyal rose to address the Supreme Court, the first sentence he spoke contained only 3 words: tariffs are taxes. And there it was, the pure economic truth and policy truth about tariffs that the founders of this government knew and that every president has known and every member of Congress has known until Donald Trump started lying about tariffs. The Trump tariff enforcers were seated in the front row at the Supreme Court today. Why? To try to intimidate the Supreme Court? The always goofy Howard Lutnick, the most incompetent Commerce Secretary in history, who is always the loudest laugh at every Trump joke, was there in the front row, bringing into the room a mind smaller than the smallest mind on the Supreme Court. And sitting beside him was the Secretary of the Treasury. In our lifetimes, the Secretary of the Treasury has never attended a Supreme Court hearing. The last Secretary of the Treasury known to have attended a Supreme Court hearing was the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. But that was in 1796. Hamilton attended a Supreme Court hearing only when he was a former Secretary of the Treasury, the year that he attended that hearing. And so it is entirely possible that no currently serving Secretary of the Treasury has ever attended a Supreme Court hearing until the relentlessly ineffectual Scott Bessent, who appears to believe that the most important thing about being a Treasury Secretary is dressing the part, while being willing to say the most ridiculously false things ever said about tariffs by a Treasury Secretary. Donald Trump himself had been threatening to attend the Supreme Court hearing, presumably as some kind of intimidation tactic. But he chose in the end to send his completely unintimidating court jesters instead. Donald Trump's lawyer, arguing in favor of his illegal and unconstitutional tariffs today, had a much more difficult time than the Trump tariff enablers do when they appear in very friendly TV interviews that they submit to. The Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary have an open invitation to come on this program and discuss tariffs for the full hour or any amount of time that they choose. But they haven't shown up. Today, they had to sit there silently when Neil Katyal said tariffs are taxes. And they had to sit there silently for all 2 hours and 40 minutes in which Donald Trump's lawyer never said that tariffs are not taxes. He didn't try to make that impossible point.
Trump's tariff scheme isn't just foolish, guys, it's economically destructive and blatantly unlawful, yet somehow he chooses to make the disastrous idea the centerpiece of his so-called economic plan. A plan that does nothing but squeeze working families and drive up the cost of living. It's almost, darkly ironic at the time. After the last election, Trump himself admitted that voters rejected him and affordability issues. But instead of, learning from that, he decided to blame, of course, the media. Rather than rethinking policies that strip away assistance from struggling Americans, Trump's instincts was always to lash out at Fox News for not, parroting his propaganda loudly enough. That tantrum, guys, didn't help him, and now he's doubling down on the same failed economic delusion in a fresh outburst online. He tried to pitch a new spin on his tariffs, and in a shocking turn, even one of his usual allies, Scott Bessent, couldn't even stomach it. On live TV, Bessent effectively turned on Trump, exposing the cracks in his increasingly fragile support system. Trump said on Truth Social that people that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the most richest, most respected country in the world, with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. He also said because of the tariffs, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone.
His main argument, though, seems to be that it's about taking in the revenue, and he also promised this morning
No,
a
George,
dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people. How is he going to pay that dividend of $2,000 a person?
It's not about taking in the revenue; it's about rebalancing. And the revenue occurs early on, and then as we rebalance and the jobs come home, then it becomes domestic tax revenue.
Are you worried that the president's focus on revenue, though, which is what he's been focusing on in his public statements, is going to hurt your argument at the Supreme Court?
Not at all. It's completely consistent that the revenues come in at the beginning, then as we rebalance, which is the goal of this, bring back high-paid manufacturing jobs to the U.S., then it will then morph into domestic tax revenues. President Trump has consistently fought for the American worker, and we are seeing trillions of investments in the U.S. that would not have occurred without the tariffs. The other thing, too, is the authority that he uses is called IEPA. It is an emergency authority, and he used that emergency authority. He got the Chinese to the table to negotiate on stopping the precursors for fentanyl drugs. If fentanyl, hundreds of thousands of Americans dying every year, is not an emergency, what is? On October 8th, Chinese threatened to put export controls on rare earth materials. He was able to threaten 100% tariffs, and we were able to negotiate that away. And then finally, in terms of the general tariffs, we are doing these trade deals that would not be possible. We were at a tipping point in terms of the economy, in terms of our trade balance, and we are rebalancing successfully.
Do you have a formal proposal to give a $2,000 dividend to every American?
I haven't spoken to the president about this yet, but it could. The $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans. So, those are substantial deductions that, are being financed in the tax bill.
You could almost see the panic setting in behind Scott Bessent's eyes, guys. I mean, he scrambled to answer the question. So, we're not sending you directly $2,000. The awkward hesitation, kind of said it all. This was a brutal moment for Trump, you've got to understand, who spent years, railing about supposed government waste and promising that, his billionaire buddy Elon Musk would somehow fix it all. That fantasy collapsed spectacularly, just like every other Trump-Musk publicity stunt. Back in the day when Trump and Musk teased Americans with absurd promises, the so-called Dodd checks, claiming that everyone would magically, get thousands of dollars somehow. In my opinion, it was the classic Trump, a flashy con artist wrapped in fake populism. Now he's faced with the damage his own economic policies have inflicted on working people. he's dusting off the same, hollow gimmick, promising handouts he has no intention or ability, frankly, to deliver. So he's just kind of spinning it the best he can. Sure, kind of Trump's stimulus checks during the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, they did make a difference, and some people did momentarily kind of feel supported. But you got to understand that was a global emergency, and everyone was doing it. Every government was most governments were supporting that. So, it wasn't no sound economic policy. So he even stamped that, to be honest, on his name. Turning into a lifetime cap of campaign ad. So compare that with someone like Biden. He didn't choose to kind of politicize that relief, which was a good decision. But so what happens is that Democrats should learn from as well, because when Democrats don't take credit for real accomplishments like the infrastructure bill, for example, Republicans just swoop in and falsely just claim that victory. That's why strong, independent, progressive media is crucial to cut through the MAGA propaganda machine and highlight who's actually helping people. And here's the truth, guys. Bezos wasn't forced to admit it on air, that there's no dividend, no free money. So no bailout from Trump, guys. He's not saving anyone. He's actively making things worse. Trump is backing efforts to block food assistance for SNAP recipients and threatening, kind of punish. He wants to punish Democratic governors like Gavin Newsom, Pritzker, and Wes Moore for trying to step up where the federal government won't. So it's cruelty dressed up as policy, guys, and it's why Governor Wes Moore's fiery response the other morning is something every American should see.
We're joined now by the Democratic Governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. Good to have you here in person.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
So, Governor, 1 in 8 Americans use food stamps in Maryland. You have about 700,000 people, as I understand it, who rely on this for food aid. Since the Supreme Court put that stay in place on Friday, do you know whether that money will actually be available to residents in your state to buy food?
We don't know, and that's why we're not waiting. It is why, just in the past few days, I have authorized over $10 million that's going towards heating assistance for people in the state of Maryland. Over $10 million has gone to our Maryland food banks, that we have made public transportation free for all of our federal workers, because they in many cases are going to work and not being paid. Mm-hmm. And I have also authorized $62 million to go towards SNAP, to make sure that SNAP is not going to be interrupted for the people of Maryland for as long as we can, despite the fact that we are waiting for the President of the United States to finally do his job. We are watching the president who is literally breaking the law so people can starve. But we're not going to sit there and tolerate it in our state.
Well, you just heard Director Hassett say that they are trying to follow the law, which is why they went to the courts. The USDA did say they were going to work towards implementing full payments, and then there was this Supreme Court stay put in place. So do you have clarity on when money might be coming through at all? Like, what's the federal government telling you?
There is no clarity at all. In the past 6 days, we've received 4 different measures of guidance from the USDA and from the Trump administration about how to handle it, where initially it was said, well, listen, we want the states to help to support. And despite the fact that this program was built as a partnership between the federal government and the states, where the federal government were really helping to underwrite these costs for people. And then once we decided to step up and say we are going to make sure that our people are going to be okay.
You were fronting the money.
That we were going to front the money. Okay. We've now received guidance saying the states are going to be punished for fronting the money. There is a chaos, and it is an intentional chaos that we are seeing from this administration, and where they have money for everything. They got money to fight wars. They got money for ballrooms. They got money for everything. But when it comes to supporting the American people, that's now when they're crying, well, we're broke, and that's not what the law requires us to do.
I think there needs to be more leaders with courage and conviction, like Governor Wes Moore, for example, governors who are willing to stand up for democracy, not bend to Donald Trump's authoritarian games as usual. Every Democratic governor, and frankly, anyone who claims to believe in fair elections, needs to get serious about, redistricting and protecting the vote. This isn't just about another policy, guys, policy debate. It's a battle for the soul of democracy, in my opinion, and a fight against Trump's relentless attempts to rig the system in his favor as usual. it can't fall solely on, you know, leaders like Gavin Newsom to hold the line. It kind of, everyone needs to put in their fair share. So every governor and voter who cares about truth and fairness has to step up. That's the only way to stop, you know, kind of Trump's MAGA movement from rewriting the rules to cling to power. We'll keep pushing this conversation here, amplifying them voices that refuse to give in to, you know, these corrupt type of extremist views. And as always, guys, I appreciate you for staying with me. Stay connected, stay subscribed, like and comment on the video, and I shall see you on the next one.